minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning.
Good morning.
During last April's hearing at the EPA management issues, Chairman Chaffetz highlighted what he called, and I quote, management failures at the EPA. I'm not sure if that characterization is an appropriate one, and it appears that we're still in discussion about this today. But I wanted to discuss what has occurred since last April. And it's my understanding that the EPA has taken significant steps to address weaknesses in the disciplinary process. I don't think that necessarily firing a bunch of people means that you're a good manager. That may be the sign of a poor manager that constantly has to fire people rather than bring them up to speed and make them an appropriate worker. But Mr. Myberg, your testimony described the progress EPA has made, and you state, and I'm quoting here, as a result of the work of this committee, and especially Ranking Member Cummings, we have improved our working relationship with OIG, which has enabled us to take more efficient administrative actions. Would you care to elaborate on that, sir, on that statement?
Only to say, again, that this has been a two-way street, and we feel that we have reached out to the Inspector General's office. The Inspector General's office has reached out to us in pursuit of a common objective, which is we want to make sure that employees are held accountable and the misconduct cases are dealt with appropriately, while also making sure that we do that in a way that protects people.
So how is that different than your relationship previously?
I really couldn't say for the agency as a whole from before the time I got here, but I think there's been reach out on both sides, and it's really commendable.
Mr. Sullivan, would you agree with that? And your statement, I'm going to quote from you, that the agency's internal adjudication process has dramatically improved. Is that correct? And
Yes, Ms. Plaskett. So I'll explain the difference prior to us having this biweekly meeting. For example, if we had a misconduct investigation in Denver or San Francisco, the folks at headquarters had very little visibility on that, and it may languish for months or years. Whereas now, every misconduct investigation that's pending across the agency, Mr. Myberg's staff, the attorneys at EPA headquarters, and the labor and employee relations folks, we meet biweekly, and that case heretofore that may have been languishing in San Francisco or Seattle or wherever is no longer allowed to languish. The folks at EPA headquarters have visibility on it, and they're pushing it along to make sure that those cases are addressed appropriately and expeditiously.
And you would say that the cases are moving at a much faster pace to closure than they were previously?
Absolutely, yes, ma'am. That's
and
correct.
you have evidence of that, quantitative evidence of that?
Yes. I could tell you that within the past year, we've successfully closed. Well, the agency has determined what disciplinary action to take, if any, and we've successfully closed our cases out at a much higher rate. So we can't close our case until we hear back from the agency as to what they're going to do.
Okay, and have you been satisfied with the recommendations that the agency has made on those cases?
Well, ma'am, that's something that our job is to collect the facts in a fair and unbiased manner. It's not relevant, in my opinion, on whether I think discipline is appropriate or not. I defer completely to the agency in that regard.
Got you. And you said that the process that you're describing, Mr. Sullivan, and you quote, I believe that this process can serve as a best practices model for the federal government. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. I've spoke to Mr. Cummings' staff and Mr. Chaffetz's staff, and they're taking an effort to reach out to the entire IG community using the EPA as a model to educate the rest of the IG community that maybe there's a way to get these cases moved faster government-wide.
I think that would alleviate this committee maybe having to have as many hearings as they have to these other agencies, and we can get on with the actual work of Congress if we were to do that. But would you support efforts to encourage then government-wide adoption of this, and your office would be willing to work with this committee to do that?
We certainly do support that, and we have worked with the committee, but one just caveat. The EPA, we're unique, somewhat unique in that we don't have any subcomponents. There's just one EPA and there's one IG. If you take DHS or the Department of Justice, they have multiple subcomponents, and the model that we have in EPA probably wouldn't work in a department that has multiple subcomponents, just to put that out.
And have you thought about what would work in agencies like that?
No, ma'am, I really haven't given that much thought.
We got to get you thinking on this, Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you.
Okay. So it seems to me that EPA and IG have shown that better coordination and communication can help agencies take administrative action more quickly in misconduct cases. And I'm really grateful for the work that you've done since April from our first hearing to actually address many of these issues, move these cases along to closure. I don't believe, having managed many people working at the Department of Justice with the Deputy Attorney General's office managing 9,000 attorneys, that necessarily firing people is the measure by which one determines that you've done a good job in terms of dealing with misconduct. So I'm grateful for the work that you all have done and yield the balance of my time.
I thank the gentlewoman. A couple housekeeping measures. Mr. Myberg, Mr. Micah would like to know that, for the record, and to have you answer back to committee, how many employees of the EPA get bonuses?
We'll supply that to the record.
We would appreciate it. I also want to be